Here we go, folks. Here is Wake News Radio and United We Strike Radio on our special show on March 15th, 2011. March 15th is also a date which we like to propose to you as a date to don't buy, don't comply, ask why, and get off the grid and don't support the system. Because that's the only way the DIMS, which we call DIMS, is a dominant insane minority, and their followers, the craps, criminals, run all politics, they are hurt by that the most. And we also wake up other people, and that's our mission as well. I'm your host today, Wake News Radio. I'm Detlef, and I have the great pleasure to announce to you Karen from UNITEDWESTRIKE.com and TextFree15s.com. Karen, are you there?
I am. Thank you, Detlef, for having me, and hello to your listeners.
Yeah, fine. Well, it's our listeners, because I usually have a broadcasting only in English, in German. Sorry, in German only, and we had 2 hours German programming today, and that was very interesting and lots of topics which are hot, so to talk, and that's why I thought it would be worthwhile to have a chat in English as well on the same issues. Maybe not the same as we did in the German part, but also picking up the pieces here and talking about the issues which are coming towards us all over the world. It's not just an issue which is concerning Americans only. And what I'm saying is, we have to look at the Japanese issues, the happenings which are taking place over there. And, people over here are very anxious as well in Europe, where I'm based. I'm based here in Switzerland, by the way. We talk about this subject a lot. And I follow all the news and on American alternative media on YouTube and so forth. And the mass media is currently bombarding us with informations on the Japanese earthquake and nuclear activities which are taking place over there, which have a direct impact on the west coast of America. I mean, not only the U.S. but also Canada is hit by the jet stream and the nuclear fallout issues. Isn't that correct, Karen?
Yes, it's very, very concerning. And there seems to be a bit of a blackout on the mainstream media, the privately owned media, and we are really getting the news over here. I am concerned. There's really nothing that we can do in terms of protecting ourselves from an event that has happened, although we should change our thinking, in my opinion. And we should also start to really do as much research as we can. I had found a site last night, or it had been emailed to me, that measured the radiation levels all across the country, and it updated every 3 minutes. And I had been looking at that. The highest radiation last night that I saw was in Denver, Colorado at 75. But this morning, it has been taken down. And,
oh, really?
Yeah, no longer comes up. So we don't really see what's happening there. But I'll tell you also, one of the friends that I've made in this whole journey, and you are also, you know of her and have heard her before, is Rosalind Peterson from the Agriculture Defense Coalition, or from Agriculture Defense Coalition, and from California Skywatch. And I let her know of this morning, and I'd like to share the response I got from her.
Sure. She couldn't be with us today?
No, she couldn't. She would be available later on this afternoon. But at least these are her words on this topic.
Right.
And she says, I'm sure the U.S. is keeping track of the radiation as it moves toward and over us. However, this information will be blacked out on purpose in order that the nuclear power revitalization is ongoing here. Also, one should note that President Obama has an enormous nuclear power plant money revitalization in his new budget bill, and Energy Secretary Chu, formerly of Lawrence Livermore Labs, is promoting this as well with both large and small nuclear plants. I don't expect much help from our government. Also, just to note that the head of President Obama's Jobs Council as of January 2011 is the head of General Electric, who build most of the reactors in the U.S. and also in Japan. They partially own some of the ones that are failing there. He just volunteered to help Japan to put a positive spin on their nuclear power plants just a couple of days ago. All very interesting because MSNBC is owned by GE and Comcast. We will be shut down totally on news or very little of it from now on. Rosalind.
Oh dear. Yeah, so they are all complicit in this matter.
Well, it certainly doesn't bode well, and with the lack of them actually coming out and telling the public to be careful, they seem to be downplaying it. And when you know that in the United Nations' own mandate there went 500 million people on the planet, this certainly seems to me that it could very well qualify as an extinction level event. Now, I could be wrong, but as far as the people who were living right there in the epicenter, you know, it was an extinction level event for them. And I don't know how many people we actually have to count for it to be so, or how many animals, because we still have the ramifications of the fallout in the ocean directly there. There have been other earthquakes in Japan. And these are indeed challenging times we are living in.
Well, yes, I agree. And, you know, we also picked the March 15th date to have you on, Karen, because, you know, we are both organized in the United We Strike initiative. We have this UNITEDWESTRIKE.com website also for people to join in and to get informed. So it's all in English there, by the way. So, you know, you know, we usually do on the 15th a strike, an international strike. Maybe you could tell me what your thoughts are, or what you want to share with the people listening right now.
Well, the 15th of the month is a day that we chose that coincides with our monthly growth, and a day to really step back and to think about where we are and what's happening. We have a slogan: don't buy, don't comply, and ask why. And don't buy means don't buy anything from multinational corporations today. It's our money that feeds the beast. We are the ones they train to be in servitude. We are the ones they treat like mushrooms. They keep us in the dark and they heap crap on us, as in what is happening right now. They don't want us to know about it. They continue to push unstable energy sources as nuclear power plants when there are most certainly other ways. They are cutting out the efficiency of solar panels by the spraying of all the chemicals that they do daily. They are really turning us into a prison planet. And don't buy anything, folks, that you hear on regular news, because it is privately owned and it does not serve our best interests. Don't buy anything you haven't researched for yourself, and even then, go further, and I would encourage people to remain open to possibilities that they would not ever even have imagined possible. As we learn more and more about what is going on, it opens the door to more and more questions. And so don't buy anything from these big corporations, folks. If we want to take our power back, we've got to do it at the local level. And don't comply with leaving your money in institutions that deal in derivatives, in Wall Street gambling. Right now, we subsidize criminals who give money to banks and say things like too big to fail. This is just one of the most ridiculous things that I've ever heard of. And I think, Detlef, if you think about that as well, I mean, what is too big to fail? Is that not the most absurd thing you've ever heard? Or one of the...
Oh yes, sure, Karen. I'm part of the initiative as well, and I can tell you, it's not only Americans or English-speaking people who are participating in this. It's a lot of people over here in Europe as well who are very much interested in supporting us and the idea and also getting off the grid. Because the money system we all know is a fraud. It's a fraud. I mean, this is not only a fraud in the U.S. with your Fed. It's also a fraud over here because it's the same thing. It's all the same people in the background who are ruling us or who are dominating us. I mean, that's why they are called dominant and saying minority, because it's just a few families worldwide who are controlling everything. And they're also controlling the weather. And that's what you're saying with the chemtrails. If you pay your taxes, if you buy products from them, they use this money, to finance their chemtrail operations or their HARP facilities. And we talked about this in the first 2 hours. I mean, HARP, and we've done this on our UNITEDWESTRIKE radio marathon broadcastings, which we had. We did talk about HARP as well. HARP you can feel HARP every day almost. I mean, if your body shivers or gets strange electric impulses, that's when HARP is active. HARP is active all over the world. There's a whole net, and most of the listeners we do have now, most probably are aware of HARP, but HARP always plays a role. When you look at the weather. Also, I talked about this in the first 2 hours in German with my audience, German-speaking audience, about the incidents in Japan. And I discovered lots of people who have investigated the HARP activities, and you can clearly see that HARP played a role in the earthquakes in Japan. Absolutely. Played a role. If it's the only reason, I'm not sure. But HARP plays a role. And if you give such a power to people over you, financed by your money, then you should immediately stop that. What do you think, Karen?
I think that you're exactly right. They've trained us to not only be subservient to them, but the beauty and the brilliance of this terrible plan is that they train us to work for the system, to always be subservient, and to pay for our own demise. Now, I am not as knowledgeable in HARP as you are, my friend, although I would not be surprised. I know that they began experiments in Vietnam along the Ho Chi Minh Trail to make it rain so that it was more difficult for the Vietnamese to be able to get supplies. I know that they are wanting to own the weather by 2025. I know that in the great earthquake that hit Japan several years ago, there were different colors in the sky that were attributed to HARP, yet hit China. I know that there is a huge movement within the DIMS to depopulate the planet, to vaccinate us. Bill Gates, in his own words, talks about that. I know that even if you go back to some of the presidents and what they say in their own words, there is a cabal secretly working in the background. I had lots of great quotes on taxfree15.com, but right now we are switching hosts, so I apologize. People who go there are directed to UNITEDWESTRIKE.com, but I'm going to be working on getting the website back up and moving. But definitely things are not as they seem. They are not what we have been led to believe. And that's the last part of the saying of don't buy, don't comply, ask why. It is time for people to really seriously ask why. I just was listening to Alex Jones, and there was a young man who called in who could not find potassium iodide. He did find a doctor who gave him a prescription. When he went to have it filled, they refused to fill it for him, claiming that they had already talked to the CDC and that it was not necessary at this time. So you put together the blackout of the news, the complete manipulation of the news in terms of being private, and you come up with only more questions that serve to eviscerate our ability to know things. And if we are going to survive, we're going to have to unite as people all around the world and think outside the box and think more about healing, think more about getting in touch with God, think more about forgiveness, and start to envision a better world without allowing more nuclear proliferation, depleted uranium, wars, and the complete destruction of our planet by the military-industrial complex, who is not held accountable in any way, shape, or form whatsoever.
Yeah, thanks for your words there. Maybe we tell our listeners as well. You can get in contact with us also during this show if you want to by sending us an email to radio@wakenews.net. I repeat it, radio@wakenews.net. So if you want to add something or have a question or have some information which you want to share with us or give us a comment, please send us your email during the whole show. Even afterwards, we try to get back to you or answer this in another show, which will be coming up. Now, Karen, what I want to add as well, because it's so imminent, and many people are questioning what's happening, and the mass media just gives the information they're supposed to give to you, so you never know what they are hiding. So that's what I did in the first 2 hours in German. I also gave some feedback and some thoughts about what's happening also in Japan and what's coming over to us. And if you bear with me, I would like to say a few things to that matter, because everybody's pretty much worried, especially on the west coast of America or Canada, or even in South America, because nuclear dust could easily come over. The jet streams are so fast. We even got some measurement over here in Bavaria, just for your information, in Munich, which was pretty high, extremely high actually, for a short period of time. So you could even imagine that jet streams carry this quickly over here to Europe as well. So that's why I bought. Yeah, we got some radiation over here as well. I mean, whether this is only due to this, or we've been radiated all the time. There were these nuclear tests taking place all over the world. Especially the French military or the U.S. military or other militaries, the Russians and the Chinese and whoever. They've conducted their tests all the time and never talked about it and never, made us aware, and media never talked about this anyway. So this is the first time the media talks about this, really, part of the Chernobyl incident which we had in Russia, which was here over in Europe. But I'm just wanted to focus a little bit on what is people are expecting, which will happen, because what has happened is being reported mainly also in main media, mass media. You can see the pictures of the people, the flooding of the tsunamis and the destruction all over the place and people losing everything. I don't want to repeat this because we've seen these pictures. But what is going to come is even worse, because the predictions are, and I'm referring also to a group of people who are reporting and predicting this since a long time. This is a CETA Talk group, which also has a website, and they're predicting these things to happen. And so far, their predictions have come true. And they predicted, for instance, it will start in the Pacific area around Australia, and it happened in New Zealand. The second thing they predicted was Indonesia and the Philippines. And Indonesia with all the earthquakes and volcanic activities. And they also predicted the Japanese and Chinese area. So it happened in Japan. So the next thing they are expecting, basically, is South America. So there is this Ring of Fire, if you're familiar with this. This goes around the Pacific, around on the countries on the coasts. That's called the Ring of Fire. And this Ring of Fire is actually the next thing on the South America part, And Chile has been one of the places already, and in Colombia there has been a major earthquake a few weeks ago. So they are expecting something, and there's also the West Coast. I mean, San Francisco is just 22 years ago since the last earthquake took place there. So they are expecting something to happen there. And, all the buildings, which they have, the big buildings and the skyscrapers and the bridges and so forth, the Golden Gate Bridge, this has not been really taken care of. I mean, they have not really done anything to make it more secure and safe. So, people are pretty anxious and looking forward to something major maybe happening over there as well. So, and they are predicting also, people are predicting, looking at all the Google Earth pictures, you can look at Japan, for instance, where did all these quakes take place? And you can see them piece by piece. And there are 40, 50, 60 happening on the Pacific side of Japan, about between half a kilometer or half a mile to 100 miles or 150 miles outside off the coast. And if you look at the geographics there, Japan is on top of a ridge, and the water goes deeper and deeper and deeper until you get to a real steep ridge, which goes down almost 1,000 miles. No, not 1,000 miles, sorry, about a mile or 2 or 3. Sorry for that, chaps. But you can look it up on Google Earth. And so that's going down pretty deep. And they also found that Japan itself as a country has moved to the east about, I think it was 30 feet. So that is quite something, since the major earthquake took place a few days ago. So it has moved about 30 feet to the east. So towards this edge, towards this deep water edge. And what could happen is actually that Japan, if there are major quakes taking place, and we just had I think 5 or 6 quakes today already, over 6.0, okay, 6.0 on the Richter scale. They are expecting something even heavier to come, and this could mean that Japan not only gets another huge tsunami, but and lots of more of devastation also with more nuclear power plants being maybe in distress or blowing up or whatever, but also maybe sinking. So Japan could be sinking into the Pacific, and this would also mean a huge catastrophe for the west coast of America, meaning Canada, U.S., and also South America. Because if that tsunami comes over there, and you had a tsunami coming from this event in Japan, in California, there are pictures of that, videos about that. It was not really devastating, but imagine something like that happens. That could be an incredible thing happening. So I just wanted to inform you about this.
Thank you. Actually, in Oregon here, which is where I live, and we're inland. I was thinking we were a bit further inland, but my husband says only 70 miles. I need to check that on a map. We're in a very beautiful little valley here that I hope remains just as nice as it is now. But Brookings, Oregon, which is the first big city when you cross the border from California, was pretty much devastated, and the docks and everything were torn up down there. There was a minimal loss of life, although that's not really the greatest terminology because any life loss is not really minimal. But also
Sure.
Crescent City had a lot of activity there as well. Now, I had seen I saw just a blurb about Japan possibly sinking, which hopefully that is not going to be correct. However, last night we were listening to the Jeff Rentz program, and they were talking as well about animals who know ahead of time what is going on. And he mentioned that in Washington State, the earthworms are coming up out of the ground in rather large and noticeable numbers. In terms of a quake here hitting as well, they talked about the 19th of this month, with the moon being even closer, and that is a date to really watch out for and be aware of. So we don't really know at this time what will happen, but we're in for a bumpy ride.
Yeah, I'm not into fear mongering myself. I mean, we talk about the information we collect because, mass media is not talking about this, and this is a platform which we use also to inform our fellow people. And you always need to know, the bigger the catastrophe is, the calmer you have to become. So no panic, because once you panic, you will not be able to think straight and to make the right decisions. But if you are in the knowing, that something pretty bad is going to happen, then your consciousness is getting alert, and you try to prepare, and you see an urgency to prepare, and that's the subject I'm talking about. That was my first 2 hours in German. Just, people listening to me, and most probably people listening to the show now in English, are people who are already woken up. Otherwise they wouldn't listen to us, okay? Because, we are a step ahead in a certain way. And, people are aware, they know something, what is, what's coming up. And so we are not talking to newbies, so to say. We are talking to people who are already aware of something happening. Just, the information is not spread, and maybe the opinions are still different. But, that there will be an extinction level event. I already took up in my website, in my radio show, a couple of months ago. Okay? So I was aware. I was just not too sure how it would happen. There were several different issues, but now it has happened. The Earth axis has already shifted because, the magnetic pole difference, which has been reported on main media or mass media outlets, where they had to adjust the runways of Florida airports, for instance. They talked about this. This did not occur because the change of the magnetic pole, because that magnetic pole always stays the same. It happened because the Earth axis moved south, considerable south. So there is something pulling the Earth axis. And definitely the earthquakes will have a certain influence. I mean, the one in Chile last year, which was pretty strong, was supposed to have shifted the Earth axis, and the day shortened and so forth. And now the one in Japan has done this. But, there's something else pulling the Earth axis as well. And that's most probably coming from outer space, And also the sun activities, the radiation which took place, which is extraordinary by the sun. The other day I went outside. I don't know whether I told you, Karen. I went outside just to do some shopping in the city, and then it was a beautiful day. And as soon as the sky filled up with chemtrail flyers, I looked up in the sky, and after not even 10 minutes, I got a sunburn. And it's March. That was pretty strange for me. So there's a tough radiation taking place as well, and that's NASA has been keeping warning us. And if you watch the instruments, and by the way, this is also interesting for you, Karen. You might not know. I added another page to my website, collecting information, especially from people who are very into that on YouTube. Collecting all the links. to the different instruments, tools, and monitors on earthquakes, volcano activities, celestial events, medical things, like radiation stuff and things, and also communities. So if you're interested, you just have a look at wakenews.net. You find the Planet X. You just push there and click there. And this is also mainly done in English because most of the information comes in English. And I just put it as it is. You can read through this, although this is mainly written in German, but those particular sites are also written in English, and most of the links are in English as well. So have a look there, and maybe you can make use of one or the other links. And this is going to be adjusted all the time, so that you will find youth stuff there as well. So that was just something I wanted to mention. Yeah.
Yeah, I enjoy your website a lot, and I enjoy always speaking with you because you have really delved into a lot of these other areas that I have not done quite as much research in. I find I'm on overload many times. There's so much coming at us, but something that really does occur to me as we talk about current events and also about the 15th is the strike that we are really wanting to happen in April, which should happen before now. The big thing is to really prepare ourselves and understand that governments are corporations who are only interested in profit. We have become collateral on their debt. We are nothing more than figures either in the negative or the positive mark, and they would much rather have us in debt to them or extinct. And when we start to look around at all the things that are happening, when we know how much we have been lied to about 9/11, about World War I and World War II, and the involvement of Wall Street funding Nazi Germany and then bringing Nazis here to begin the space program, when we think about the billions of dollars we spend on war, on unstable energy, and then we get rid of the depleted uranium by putting it in weapons that are used in other parts of the world. When we look at the madness that we are running under, when we look at the extremism, any religion or God that we belong to, that we obey and honor, that tells us to murder and rape and pillage, is only a God that is furthering the destruction of our descendants and our planet. And it is time to not continue to be children of God. It is time to become adults of God and to look around and to be accountable and to take stock of what we can and to realize what we need is being destroyed, taxed, stolen, and taken away from us by governments. We have sacrificed our quality of lives to fit into systems that eviscerate us, that disempower us, that take our money from us because we're always working to pay them. In America, congressmen and senators become part of the top 5% of salaried people. They are the top 5% of the money people in this country, and we pay them to ignore us. They are our public servants, and yet we run after them, trying to get them to look at topics like aerial spraying, like geoengineering, like genetically manipulating our food, and they ignore us. And now, when we should really be understanding that there is a great possibility that radioactive material will be falling right here on our heads. My husband and I are in Oregon. We're not that far from the coast. We are not right on the coast, but there is a great possibility that this will be happening, and they don't tell us about it. And folks, what do you really need other than clean air, clean water, healthy food, self-sufficient communities, and love? We must love ourselves enough to stop being manipulated, to search for truth, to look at our families and see the real treasure that we have right there in front of us. If this earthquake in Japan does nothing more than wake us up a little bit to that, I mean, nothing more. It's already done such extreme damage. I in no way mean to minimize that. But we should let this serve as a true wake-up call to the precarious position our planet is in due to our allowance of the military madness. The Gulf massacre, the BP Gulf oil massacre continues in the Gulf of Mexico. They are playing war games in the Pacific Ocean. There is no telling at this point just how much damage really is being done to the animal life, the plant life, the human toll. Right now, every second that radioactivity leaks, and they remain quiet here because of financial obligations and the desire to have more unstable energy. Folks, we are allowing ourselves to be manipulated by a small group of criminals who have bought armies, who have bought religions, who have bought politicians. We really must encourage and help our families understand, especially those in the military and the police, that when they take off that uniform, the same tyranny that they help to enforce while they are wearing it is what they are subject to. We've got to come together. We've got to understand what is important. Do you want to risk letting your children go out and play outside in the next few days? Do you want to trust your government, who have body bags and FEMA camps and massive coffins stored in different parts of the world? We do know underground cities exist. We're not privy to them. We do know that much food has been bought by governments. There already is global government, make no mistake about it. They're tying up the loose ends now. And if they knew that in this 26,000 years an extinction level event in terms of gravity from planets seen or not seen was coming, if they knew they only had X amount of time to prepare, if they were coming out of fear, then they would do everything they could in order to get enough money to build these fortresses underground so that they could survive. If they didn't want us seeing what was happening in the sky, they'd cover it up with whatever chemicals they needed. They would not care anything about saving the planet because they would see the destruction that was coming. Now that is a possibility. But there is also a possibility that we can create miracles, and I do believe in miracles, and we are the instruments through which they flow. Physics, quantum physics proves that thoughts become things. It is time to awaken. It is time to think of a better future. It is time to be with your family. It is time to not trust the government. It is time to think for yourselves, to prepare yourselves, to take time out with yourselves. Do you want to really trust that no radiation will fall, or do you want to take precautions? Do you want to use your sick time? Do you want to think about staying home massively and saying, no more? No more lies, no more deception. We've got to heal ourselves and our planet. We've got to forgive ourselves. And we have to come together in unity and create a better world, or more of the same will continue to happen.
Well, that's wonderfully said, Karen. Thanks a lot for your thoughts there. And that's exactly what I'm experiencing over here as well. That's what we talked about in the first two hours of today's show in German as well. You know, it is important, you know, not that the single person can survive or will survive in this coming catastrophes, which we are expecting also over here in Europe. But it's important that we, as a community, as a human species, will survive, and this is only possible by unifying. And unifying, this is not only the family, which, you know, even within families there are struggles and there is hate and so forth. Not only love, but we need to find back to love, because that's the most important which we have, you know. And we also have to love our neighbors, you know, and or other people around us, and build communities. And this is also very important because we are at an age where most people are already, disconnected and only can find to each other by using something like the internet in order to get contacts. Or, there are lots of single peoples all over the world who are trying to find like-minded people. And this is also very important, to find like-minded people, because you may not be able to wake up everybody, and not everybody is joining this, international strike, or this unifying United We Strike theme, which you or we have set up. Don't buy, don't comply, ask why, or unify against the system. Unfortunately, but it's trying to find like-minded people and try to talk with other people and try to convince them. And such an emergency thing, that's why I call it this emergency radio transmission or broadcasting, is because if we don't unify now, if we don't take the opportunity of these catastrophes coming towards us in order to unify us and love each other and try to help each other, this is not only saying but also doing, by sharing your supplies with others, if they are lacking something, or sharing attention, or sharing love as such with other people, like-minded people, is very important now. That is where the spiritual thing comes in, because it's not only surviving physically. It's good to have all supply ready and everything fixed, and I had to adjust some things because I'm getting ready to be on alert, to move out here as quickly as I can if something happens. So I had to adjust some physical stuff here first, get some medicine and so forth with the nuclear things happening in Japan. So I thought, well, I have to take precautions here as well. But it's also the spiritual thing. And the more you get conscious towards these issues and the problems which are occurring, the more you get this natural the natural feeling of being a human and needing each other. And that's very important. That's what we try to convey to others as well.
It is.
Isn't it, Karen?
Yes, and also the fact that thoughts really do become things. And when you look into quantum physics and you break things down to their most basic form, they're all composed of the same stuff. We are all composed of that divine essence that flows through us equally. And it is malleable. It can change. And there are experiments that were done with water and different crystals. I forget the name of the man who did this. I believe he was a Japanese man. And he took photographs of water, of just a tiny droplet of water, after it had been, or they would swear at the water, they would pray over the water, and when water was sworn over, it was dark and murky, and there are even pictures of the flakes. They come out like beautiful flakes when they are prayed over, when they are loved. But when you swear at them, when it's anger that hits them, the water changes to reflect that. And so I really want to encourage everyone to think about that, to think about the fact that we are made of all the same stuff. Now, in terms of the radioactiveness falling, I believe that when enough of us learn how to focus our minds, and I am not by any means saying that I am capable of doing this, but I know that there are experiments out there where healing happens when a concerted effort of people come together and they collectively combine their knowledge with rituals that enhance healing. And what I can do, though, is I can bless the water and the energy in all things, because we are all the same. And doing that helps me to let go of some of that fear. Now, I will take precautions, but I also am, I guess, resigned to the changes that are inevitable, that I have no control over. I am hoping for the best passage. My prayer is simply thank you, God, for the best solution for the highest possible good of all. And that is all I can really do, aside from prepare with myself, prepare with my husband, and do what we can to be smart about staying indoors probably for the next 2 or 3 days. I don't know, keeping track of what news we do get, blessing things, and enjoying more of the moments for things that mean something to us. Having a good card game. Maybe I will take more time to maybe bead another necklace, or watch a movie, or read a book that really speaks to my soul, and enjoy being in this human body, because there is no telling how much longer it will last, it won't last. And then to prepare, hopefully, for the birth of a new way of living and thinking and creating and being, where all of us can celebrate our equality and our God-given rights and the miracle that is around us every second. And that is my hope.
Yes. Thanks for sharing your thoughts with us, Karen. Now, we will be approaching a break coming up in a few minutes. And maybe I just mention, if you have any, to our radio listeners, if you have any questions or informations or comments on what we are talking about or what we should talk about in the next upcoming hour, then why don't you send us your thoughts via email to radio@wakenews.net, radio@wakenews.net, and we will get to your questions, informations, comments then in the next hour. So, we try to connect with you and try to share our thoughts with you. So I'm thankful that you joined us in this emergency radio transmission, which is basically also an opportunity for all of us to get conscious about not only worrying about physical issues and threats from nuclear fallout or any other catastrophe coming towards us, but also thinking about solutions and new ways to look at life and our way of being. And I think Karen just expressed what we all have to think about as well. And it's not only just the food and the water, which we will be talking also next hour, how to best prepare and what are the important issues, which I'd like to share with you. I mean, my thoughts and our thoughts, and but also, our worries. I mean, we all have worries as well. I mean, we have to overcome them, though, and this is only possible by sharing our worries with each other and thinking about solutions. And there are always solutions, and that's very, very important, I think. So let's see. We are now entering the the second hour, but we will have a quick break. And please stay tuned, because this is going to get pretty interesting, because we are expecting also other people joining us, also from other countries. So Karen is from the US, I'm from Switzerland or Europe, if you want to. And there are more people to come. And please stay with us, because we will touch some more issues, important, vital informations, and sharing the news thoughts we are having. So please stay tuned. We are now getting into a break. Just a second, please. Here we go.
stand up and fight. Who will back me up and do what's right? We are free men and we will stay the same. United, we stand divided, we fall. What's going on? Dreams on the road. What's going down? Peace and love. What's going on? No election. What's going on? What's going on?
Join me on Running Mead Radio at 7 p.m. every Friday evening. Have you voted for your constitution documents in the Running Mead Constitution Document Project? Vote now. Vote for it, and Running Mead Archive, and enter your document which you want to see included in England's Constitution. At the same time, don't forget to vote for the document you want to see excluded from England's Constitution. On Running Mead Radio, your vote does count. On Running Mead Radio at 7 p.m. every Friday evening. Have you voted for your constitution documents in the Running Mead Constitution Document Project? Vote now. Go to Vote for It and Running Mead Archive and enter your documents which you want to see included in England's Constitution. At the same time, don't forget to vote for documents you want to see excluded from England's Constitution. On Running Mead Radio, your vote does count.
Now is the time to stand up and fight.
again here. No, we're not live because the music starts. Okay, one more track. Sorry about that. We're right there.
Faces and pictures staring back at me. The violence spreads through their eyes. Like dead men walking, there's no life left inside. Light as a pilot 2 blocks away, never crossing their lives. Who made us enemies? Who can make us be friends? Inside my head while I'm dreaming at night. Don't trust in anyone, you know everyone lies. Deep down me, I'm not coming, man. I'm just trying to survive. The tragedies come too fast. This is goodbye, goodbye.
Hey, here we go. Here's Radio Wake News and United We Strike Radio. So we are welcoming you back to our second hour of our emergency broadcasting. Why emergency broadcasting? Because we think it is very necessary that we take action. And the action should not only be physical. We have also to take action in spiritual ways. And we've been starting to talk about this subject in the first English-speaking part, and I had 2 hours before in the German-speaking. So maybe some listeners are still on there and listening to our English-speaking transmission now, and I welcome you back, and thanks very much for sharing our thoughts. And if you have any questions, informations, or comments you want to make, you can do this during the show. We have another hour here coming up via email. Send it please to radio@wakenews.net. I'm Detlef of wakenews.net, Radio Wake News, and we are transmitting specially for you today. So we will have a few guests here, and I'm your host for the next hour. And those guests, Karen, you've met already in the first hour. And we have 2 great guys from the UK. The first is Rick. Rick, are you there?
How do you do?
Yes. Okay. How do you do? And we do have Andrew Johnson. Andrew, are you there?
I'm here.
Oh, that's wonderful. So just checking up, the technical issues, you always have to be alert to be on the show, and this is all working fine. So we basically had the subject of the terrible incidents which took place in Japan and still taking place, and the consequences for the whole world, especially for the Americans and the Canadians and maybe the South Americans at first hand, but the Europeans also will have dire straits on that one. And we were discussing not only the issues on what we are expecting, what's further happening, but also the issues about what we can do to prepare, not only physically, but also spiritually, and unifying everybody. And this should be also a topic of this coming hour, that we talk about the possibilities of waking up our fellow citizens, fellow people, and what does everybody see as possible preparations for the time coming. And maybe Karen, because we like you to have the first one. Maybe you can introduce further.
Well, it just, I had been speaking about quantum physics, breaking things down to where we're all made of that same stuff, that same divine essence. And also the unstable nuclear power plants that we are so prone to go along with. And it just seems to me that if we cannot control the energy, if it is unstable, we should look into alternative forms. And we had a guest who was with us on our marathon on Saturday, Andrew Johnson, who knows more about cold fusion energy and mentioned it then. And so I would be happy to listen to his thoughts now on alternatives and what he thinks about this, well, the huge catastrophe there in Japan. Andrew, are you? Okay,
I'm here. Yeah, I was waiting to see if Detlev was going to come in, but yeah, that's fine. Well, I think initially what I'd like to just mention is the situation with the nuclear stations is somewhat unclear, and I've seen a very large amount of fear-mongering going on, and I think it's still at this point somewhat unclear as to what is actually going to transpire and what is transpiring, and how dangerous it's going to be. Don't get me wrong, I think the situation is not very nice, but there's certainly an engineering analysis which I read a couple of days ago, which you can find by Googling, I just forget the name of the guy. It's somebody from Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and he did a very good analysis of the way that the failure in these reactors unfolded, and how in actuality these reactors are designed to account for catastrophic failures. But nevertheless, we've heard that radioactive material has been released. But we also have to understand that radioactive material is a natural part of the environment. For instance, in this country, we have a problem with what's known as radium, and people have actually had to be moved from houses because of radium being in the ground underneath their houses, and it naturally emits radiation, which can build up, in your body over a period of years. So, radiation is a natural problem, as well as being something which comes out of nuclear reactors. Now, don't get me wrong; I don't in any way support the use of nuclear power at all, because of what I was talking about on Saturday is one reason. That's not the only reason, but that's one reason, which is cold fusion, which I can talk a little bit about in a minute. But I just really like to say that we just need to keep a close eye on the situation in the reactors, and I think the people in Japan, I've been to Japan twice, by the way, and I know the people, and I know what they're like, and they're going to be. I was rather annoyed with the stories that were being put out on InfoWars, immediately saying, all the West Coast is going to be contaminated in 7 days' time, or whatever they were saying. What about the Japanese, for heaven's sake? It's on their soil. So let's be talking about them first. they're the ones that are going to get it first. And let us also not forget what happened in Europe in 1986 with the Chernobyl disaster, which was much closer to home for us. I mean, in the UK here, we had sheep which were not allowed to be eaten because of the levels of cesium which had fallen onto the soil, and then the sheep had ingested this. And I can't remember exactly what happened because that was 1986. But I do remember the very, very serious fears that were instilled by the media in this country. And at the time, I was at university. I was at Lancaster University in the UK at the time this event occurred. And we had a nuclear power station very near us, within, I think, about 10 miles, a nuclear power station at a place called Heysham, which is on the west coast of England. And the media were very quick to report that there was a fire at Heysham. I think it was just a couple of days after the Chernobyl disaster had begun to unfold. And we have to remember that although that area is a no-go zone now, we survived it. I don't know how many people were affected, but it's not as if everyone in Europe died because this station became into a critical condition. So I think, in essence, we don't fully know what's going to unfold, and I certainly have hopes that just without going into the secret technology angle, which forms what cold fusion is, we're going to have some better procedures, at least, for dealing with this material that is going to be causing the problems from the station. So I would initially say those things at the outset, and try and ensure that people try and listen to both sides of the extremes, because of course we've had certain sort of denials that are going on from the government ministers and the other people, and then we've also got this hyper scaremongering in the media, and then also we've got to remember all the nuclear tests that have been done. Without any protection. I mean, this thing's in a concrete bunker, these things are in a concrete bunker, but yet we've had thousands, I don't know how many hundreds of nuclear tests we've had since the 1940s. I think the first one was at Port Chicago in 1944, where there was an accidental nuclear explosion, which you can go and check that out. That's not hardly spoken about. That was covered up. And that, I think, was a reasonable-sized nuclear explosion, which was said to be just an ordinary a dump of TNT or something, but it was actually apparently a nuclear explosion. So there's all kinds of stuff that we haven't heard about. So that's what I say at the outset. I don't know if anybody wants to add anything or to that.
No, you're absolutely right, Andrew, and I'm glad you mentioned this. This has been discussed also in other alternative media and on YouTube and so forth. We are worrying now about Japan nuclear fallout, even here in Europe, where it is so far away. First of all, I mean, there are jet streams and so forth. I mean, it's coming over here. But it's not an immediate danger. The immediate danger is definitely in Japan, and maybe on the west coast of America. But it's the issue how the thing will develop even further, and that is something which we touched early on also in the German part of my broadcasting today. That actually there's more to come. There are predictions that even today. There were, I think, 5 or 6 quakes around the same area, around 6.0. And wow. This is usually this is showing that something is going to break out soon. So if there are further issues happening, and I explained this. I don't. You probably didn't listen to that in the first hour.
No, I was away. Yeah,
sure. And you came on short notice. Thanks a lot, by the way. So that was, it's an emergency time, and that's
sure.
when we take opportunity of expressing our opinions and also sharing our information. And that's what has been predicted, because the earthquakes did not take place exactly on the surface of Japan, but off the coast.
Right.
And
right.
It's about even 100 or 150 miles off the coast, and there's a ridge with very deep water coming, several thousand feet water, yeah, and
right.
there, and also Japan moved slightly. There are different assumptions. I'm even heard something like 30 feet. I don't know whether this is true or not, but moved to the east about 30 feet. I mean, let's assume this is correct. Then, this is showing something even more severely happening, which would be, maybe, I don't know, but I'm assuming this could even happen. I think an even major earthquake, which is even doing much more harm than that.
Well, I think there's that potential. I mean, I agree with you. We don't exactly know what is going to happen, and it's rather out of our hands. And I think I think that what you were saying in the introduction, preparing spiritually, that's kind of more important, and understanding the wider significance of this in the unfolding picture of things. I mean, we're clearly seeing a pattern of some kind over the last sort of 4 and 5 years, at the very least, maybe even a longer period now, with the Phuket tsunami, and then Haiti and Chile, and the one in China. And then we had the one in Honduras, which is less spoken about. So there's clearly something going on. I myself have to wonder how much of this is being manipulated with technology, and how much of it is some kind of energy influx into the solar system. Which, I mean, again, if this is something I've written about separately, if you go and look at all the other planets, you can see that there's been significant changes on all the other planets. For example, Jupiter had 3 red spots at one time. Within a few months. So clearly something is going on in the whole solar system. And so I'm kind of interested in that side of things, as well as to what is the reason for all this increase in activity, because that kind of can get lost in the fear game if we get sucked into this fear game, and you forget what it all ties into.
Well, hasn't sunspots been linked to a lot of the global warming that's going on through the solar system? Because every planet's warming up a little bit, haven't they? And solar spot activity has been particularly high recently.
Well, it's actually the reverse. According to some, there's one paper which was published that if you get a reduced sunspot activity, it essentially means that the Earth will end up cooling down. And this is one of the classic correlations is with what's called the Maunder minimum, which is an observation of sunspots which goes back into the 17th century. And this is well known. I've referenced a paper about this in a report that I compiled just before Christmas. And the sunspot activity, the less sunspots there are, the colder it is. And there was a period of about 70 years during the 17th century where the sun was almost blank of sunspots, and this corresponded pretty precisely with what's known as the Little Ice Age, where we had a very cool period in northern Europe, with sort of frost right up until the middle of the summer sort of thing, and only a few days frost-free and this sort of thing. So it appears that these sorts of things have happened in the past, these cycles, and obviously we've heard about very violent earth upheavals in the past, like the supervolcanoes, and the erupting, and I think there was the great Siberian one, however many hundreds of thousands of years ago. I forget the name of that event, but that was a huge event which spanned the whole continent, a great, raft of volcanic eruptions for hundreds of miles, in one kind of long fault line. So, maybe we're seeing the beginnings of that. I don't know. And there's also talk of the Yellowstone, area, with that having a crater which has been filling up with magma. And this, people are supposedly being evacuated from there because the sulfur level has got so high, and da-di-da-di-da. And there was a big scare about that about 2 or 3 years ago, and of course that's all now died away. So I don't know. I mean, I think anything could happen really, and I think preparing yourself mentally for that is perhaps the best thing that you can do.
Yeah, that's what I learned. I had a survival trainer on the last show on the 12th, where we had our UNITEDWESTRIKE radio marathon. The first couple of hours in German, and he's Harald Trenner, is a German fellow, and he's pretty experienced. And he said the most important thing is, the bigger the catastrophe gets, the calmer you have to become. So you have to be very, very off panic, no panic, because then panic is destroying everything. You know, your thoughts and so forth are diluted. Then so you have to stick to the rules and even think about it. That's also what I wanted to this emergency radio call here, just to encourage everybody to face the subjects, face the issues, face the dire straits we're facing everywhere over the continents and the world, because it may come to your corner as well.
Yes.
So
yes.
better be prepared, especially if you say something is happening in space.
Right.
Maybe that's something nobody, not even HARP is involved in there.
Right. Well,
most probably. Yeah. So this is something we cannot prevent. So we have to face it. We have to prepare it. And the best thing to do is to prepare mentally first. Don't you think?
I agree.
So if you would be asked, and I ask you now, what would you do in order to mentally prepare? I talked about this in the first 2 hours in German, and I sometimes talk in English about this, but I'd like to ask other people. Karen has given some thoughts to that and ideas, and she talked about it in the first hour in the English transmission. And by the way, for our listeners, and we have quite a few, if you have questions or informations or comments you want to make, or to Andrew, if you want to ask him something, why don't you send us an email to radio@wakenews.net. And we are very pleased if we get some of your replies, and we try to answer them, if not in this show, then afterwards. So thanks for this sending in. So Andrew, what would your reply be? If you were being asked, how do you prepare?
Well, my own sort of method of working really is to gather information. So my way of preparing is to try and gather as much information as is reasonably available and possible in whatever time frame you're working to. Whether that's just before some kind of big event or whatever it is, and then I do my best to analyse that information. But that's because I'm an analytical person. I try and break things down and understand them so that I can make an informed decision on whatever it is. So my own way is just to gather the information and try and dispassionately analyse it, and try and work out the best solution. And that's, I suppose, the left brain way. But my other way essentially is to try and remind myself that although my body is flesh and blood, and I feel physical pain, etc., that I'm an infinite being of infinite sort of power, really, or part of that sort of being, and I am connected into that. However easy it can be to forget that in this material world. I think if you realise that you're part of this ongoing, infinitely unfolding, picture, then that can in of itself change your way of reacting to things, I suppose, and it can in a sense encourage a kind of calmness, because that in essence you're indestructible anyway in a sense, because your consciousness will survive in some other form, and maybe even to be returned to this realm at a later or even an earlier date, because you start to get into ideas of time not actually being linear. It's only linear because of the way we have to have physical bodies, and this sort of thing. So I've now become much more aware in the last sort of 5 to 10 years of that side of things, and the evidence which shows to me that is the true nature of the way that we actually are. But the old saying, I don't know who said this first, but we're spiritual beings having a human experience. That's the thing, And if you can remind yourself of that, then that helps. It certainly helps me anyway.
Yeah, I mean,
that's real
yeah, Karen, why don't you?
Well, I just wanted to comment and say that is really interesting, and that is something that I attempt to do as well. Although in situations like this, it's easy to forget that. But I think most of us who are raised with any kind of religious background believe that we are spirit anyway, that we go beyond this. But then somehow it just gets so convoluted in between, because we are taught that our true place is after we die, and in order to go to a better place, we have to do all this sacrifice and rituals and jump through all these hoops, when if you step back further from that, we are so much a part of everything that is happening, that divine essence that is flowing through us. But I guess it's our human nature that causes us to question, well, then why these catastrophes? Why this big shift that has to be so traumatic? But when you, again, look at it in terms of, well, no matter how bad it is, we go on in some form or another afterwards, it does make it easier to deal with all the chaotic mess, or just all the chaotic things that are happening right now. Did that make sense?
Yeah.
See, I was always wondering, to me it came as a surprise once, I learned that scientists actually are also thinking, of things which they cannot prove. That's, usually the analytic style is what counts in science, but there are lots of physics who are really into also thinking there's much more to it than just what they can measure and explain. And that was pretty encouraging. That started a few years ago. I mean, when I learned that there are changes in the minds of scientists. What do you think, Andrew?
Absolutely, and I think I became aware of some scientific studies a few years ago, for example, which I think applies very much to the current situation, and that's the power of intercessionary prayer. And I think there was some study done in a hospital where they monitored the patients that were prayed for by some group and the patients that weren't prayed for. And the patients that were prayed for, on the whole, did better. They recovered more quickly or more completely than the patients that weren't directly prayed for. And this was, again, a double-blind study. So I think that in of itself is one of many types of experiments that done which shows how our intent can influence an outcome. And this is something which has been demonstrated a number of times. I mean, there's a chap called Dean Radin. He's a chap that talks about these intention experiments and how they influence the taste of chocolate, for example, in a box. And there's been some quite interesting research on that. So I think it's proved that our consciousness does shape reality, and I think, again, this could possibly tie into the current events, which I think could, to a greater or lesser extent, this has already come up in the discussion, be being engineered by somebody. And I, again, have come to the conclusion that there is a group of beings or entities here associated very closely with our planet, which is manipulating things and causing events to happen primarily to create fear and chaos and uncertainty, and that goes right across the board. And I think these beings are very well aware of human psychology, and again, because of what I talked about on Saturday, at least in brief, it's the reason why I know that this is true is because of 9/11. We know that 9/11 wasn't a natural event at all. There's no way that those towers just, disappeared because, there was a big extra strong gust of wind or something. We know that was an engineered event. For this current event, we can't really say for sure whether it's been engineered or not. I suspect it might have been, and I suspect that one of the very interesting bits of research that this seems to tie into, I don't know if how people are familiar with this, is there's a young man called Rick Clay, who I was very taken with this piece of research that he did, which is around the 2012 Olympics. And he looks at all the symbolism, both within corporate logos and within the 2012 Olympics, and the Zion symbol that's built into it, and all this. You've probably heard some of this stuff. But the key phrase for me that Rick Clay that really brings some of what we're saying here together, I think, is that he said that this group of people are trying to hijack consciousness. They're trying to hijack consciousness. And I think he was absolutely right. I think there is an effort to hijack our consciousness and use it to create a reality which these beings, whoever they are, some people call them the Archons, some people call them the Reptilians or whatever. I mean, I don't really know, because I think it's difficult to put a name to them. They may not even be, if we accept that we're not totally physical beings, I mean, we can be manipulated physically, but I think we can also be manipulated spiritually as well. And I think that these beings know that, and that's what they're up to. And the unusual thing about Rick Clay, I recommend that people go and have a watch of that, because it's really, really interesting the way he's put it all together. And he ties in, the symbolism with the number 11 and this sort of thing, which I found encoded in my life, the number 11 in rather odd ways. And he ended up dead at the age of 26. I seem to talk about a lot of dead people. And he was supposedly committed suicide, and this was 3 or 4 months after he published this research into 2012. I've got a DVD about this, which I didn't really make it. I've just burned it onto a DVD because it disappeared off Google Video. This video that somebody made, and somebody else has reposted it now. But it's really interesting. It's called Transition of Ages, 2012 Transition of Ages, and he even ties it in with the the alien invasion type of scenario, which seems to be another thing that they're now ramping up to with all these UFO document releases that have been happening over the last sort of 4 and 5 years. And this increase, we've got this new film coming out, Battle of Los Angeles, which is coming out. I think it's out now. It's just come out a week or two ago. And that's about an alien invasion. And I saw a trailer for that, and it looks pretty shocking. It's some pretty graphic special effects, apocalyptic and all that. So I think we're getting all this stuff laid onto us, both from Hollywood and now, of course, from the real world in the various events that have happened. And I think that goes back to what you were saying about trying to be calm, and trying to just focus on what you can control and influence and make a positive contribution to.
Yeah, and also I mean, there are people who are not necessarily believing in God or the creation or the creator. I do. I mean, I'm not a religious person though, but I'm not belonging to any real religious group. But I'm convinced there is a creator, and we have a strong connection to our God. Not in a religious sense, no. Don't get me wrong, but in the spiritual sense, because we are part of the whole. And if somebody wants to rip off something of us by using fear, for instance, as an instrument, then they want to either prevent something, prevent us from getting reconnected to our Creator. That could be the reason, or they try to gain something for themselves, in order to do something with it, to get some access to something which they don't have, for instance. And what do you think?
Well, I was just, I'm fascinated by, Andrew, what you said about they're trying to hijack our consciousness. It does make sense to me. I'm familiar with that concept. I've never heard it put quite so concisely, but it certainly seems true, because we're born into systems that are created ahead of time that train us to give away our power. And when you look at the manipulation of the food, you look at the fluoride in the water, you look at the school systems, the revisionist history, when you start following the money back, and also fear out of chaos, there are really only 2 emotions, love and fear. And if we're coming from fear, we can be more easily controlled and manipulated. And if there are other beings, entities, whatever, if I've heard that there is a single bloodline possibly from the time of Atlantis or the pharaohs that simply came here. Then you get into the Anunnaki, and there's so many things that are just, the rabbit hole is just never ending. But it certainly does make sense to me that they do not want us to think for ourselves, and that's the biggest barrier that we need to break through.
Right. I mean, I totally agree with that, and I think the difficulty is, as you mentioned there, unpicking a lot of the information, and you hear about these different groups, and you know, and you really begin to get a bit bewildered by it all. And I've sort of read about the Anunnaki and Zecharia Sitchin, and then you hear that he's really a Zionist shill and all this, So sometimes, because you can't read the Sumerian cylinder seals yourself, you just think, well, what do I do now? But I mean, as you say, I think there is so much which is geared towards controlling our thoughts, and particularly now, as I say this to people, they want control of everything. It's not just, it's the control of your thoughts, control of your spirit, control of the food supply, control of the energy, control of the air that we breathe. It's the whole shooting match. It's like, they're building this physical prison without any bars, the panopticon as it's called, and that's one word that Alex Jones uses. I've kind of gone off Alex Jones a lot in the last few years, but some of the phrases he used again are quite concise and seem apt. And so I think that's what's going on. It's all about our consciousness and our spirit. That's being used by somebody as either a food supply or an energy source. That's what it looks like to me, and I'm not the first to say it. Lots of other people have said that.
Well, we also see all of the predictions for this point in time, and that the humans as a species are ready for a raise of consciousness, which is really so necessary in order to deal with this, and that a lot of the interference has been purposely put here because the powers that be do not want us thinking for ourselves. They do not want us to unite. They do not want us to begin to really materialize the thoughts becoming things in terms of healing and blessing the water and energy and all things, and understanding that each one of us is really a pinpoint of light that is flowing through us from all directions in just a magnificent flow of life, of creativity. But if they keep us afraid, if they kill us, if they torture us to make it seem like it's worse, which obviously it would be, but they can keep us so afraid and so divided that instead of embracing the changes and recognizing none of us really die, no matter how horrific it may appear. But if we can come together, we can create on this planet lives of just such joy and abundance, because there truly is more than enough to go around.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you're on the spot, Karen. Thanks a lot for your comments. Is Rick still there? Rick, are you on?
Yeah, I'm still here. Yeah, I'm just enjoying the conversation.
Yeah, okay.
No, I totally agree, and I've followed many of those things myself. And I do agree. Fear is being used to manipulate us.
Yeah, so that's actually an experience which we can all share, and that's also an important issue, because we don't want to be another medium or another source of distributing fear, and that's why I said we need this emergency radio broadcasting in order to set things clear. First of all, I agree with Andrew. Get some facts clear, okay, and through the look through the curtains, or try to at least see who's behind all that. And if we all sum it up, it all looks very suspicious. That this may be another trick of those beings, just getting us into submission and just doing what they want us to do. So I think that's an interesting thought, isn't it?
Well, I've also heard they feed off our energy as well. Whether that's true or not, I've absolutely no idea. But fear and bad feelings and empathy. When we have empathy for people, apparently, I've heard that if these beings do exist, that they can feed off of that.
Yeah.
I think again, there's a lot of sort of hijacking and diversion that goes on of these various energies, and I think deception is one of the weapons that they use, and there's a lot of deception goes on. I mean that just to talk for a minute about cold fusion, which brings in the idea that, as well as what we've just been discussing, which I think is vital to sort of think about and consider and try and integrate into your consciousness. I think it's just this idea that there are always alternatives. There are always alternatives available, and certainly in terms of the energy, I think I don't know what's going to happen over the next few years. I really don't. We hear all these various dire predictions and Mayan calendar things and all this, that, and the rest of it, and I really don't know what's going to happen. I've got very mixed feelings because they all said that. The first end of world prediction that I heard was in 1986, and that was Mother Shipton, who was a local prophet from near where I used to live, and I was thinking, oh, that's great, because that's when I go to university, and the world didn't end in 1986. And then I read this book called The Late Great Planet Earth, and that was talking about a nuclear war starting over oil in the Middle East, and that didn't happen. And then I heard another story that the Jehovah's Witnesses, They were convinced the world was going to end in 1977 because of what they'd calculated from the Bible script, and then a load of them left the faith, or if that's the right word for it, in 1977 because the world didn't end in 1977. So, you hear all these predictions and they end up being wrong, basically. So you wonder, are these just, again, things that are put out there to manipulate people into a state of fear? As we've already discussed, but going back for a minute to the cold fusion thing, because that is something which I think is kind of like it's just one of these things that needed to be suppressed, because it seemed to be very important. That if you can crack the energy problem in the physical realm, if you can have as much energy as you need, that's one of the ways in which you can completely transform the world. If you can have free energy and anti-gravity, two phenomena which seem to be interrelated, then you can completely transform the way that the physical world works completely. You can change everything, and I think that's why things like nuclear power have been allowed to be developed and used on a large scale, because they have all these dangers associated with them. They are they consume materials, so obviously even with a nuclear reactor, even though the amount of material used is relatively small, you still have to keep, feeding in the uranium rods every 3 months or 6 months or however long they run for. I don't know all the details, but so when you've got an energy source which uses fuel, then you can control it. But if you've got a fuelless energy source like the one that Tesla put into his Pierce Arrow car in the 1930s, and that he was driving around the place on no fuel, just an electromagnetic device of some kind, for 90 miles an hour, then that presents the people running the planet with a bit of a problem, because you ain't got to go back to them for your next fill up. And I think so that this idea of metering things is obviously one of the control mechanisms under which your expectations and your thinking is limited, and that just that concept right there can be used to manipulate the whole environmental movement, for example, because the whole environmental movement is based on conservation of resources and stuff. Well, maybe I'm exaggerating a bit there, but you get the idea, you get the drift, and the environmental movement now, whilst at the basic level, we've got to preserve the resources that we have. Nevertheless, if you don't need to consume resources to, have technology and things, then that puts a bit of a different spin on the environment situation, in the environmental movement as well.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what they want to try to get into our heads, that we are not humans or people, that we are consumers. You are a consumer. You're not a human being. And that's one of their tricks, with always this debt-based money system out of nothing, that's the biggest scam in the world, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, that's one of their tricks. And this is very, very, very interesting. Once you have discovered this for yourself, then you can't get on living in this matrix. And this is something which they have created. I think if you've seen these Hollywood movies on the matrix, I mean, they're a little, too much effects and so forth. But the idea, it's fantastic. It's actually, they are revealing what they've done to us. By showing this,
I agree, and I think going back to the sort of spiritual angle, where I don't know if people here have experienced this, but certain events happen, and they link together in your life, and and you end up finding all these coincidences, and you seem to see a guiding influence in your life, which is not obvious until you connect certain events. And I think that also is tied into this idea of waking up from the matrix, is that when you sort of begin to wake up out of the matrix, as you described in the film there, right. Then you begin to see these synchronicities have a much greater significance than you realised. And I wonder, even for example, how and why was the Matrix film ever made, and why did it appear at this time? Why didn't it appear 10 years from now or something? It's obviously, to me, a key trigger in the unfolding of events on planet Earth. It's almost as if there's this other force which is influencing certain events and giving us
you mean such a counter force, sort of?
Yes, a force of light, essentially, is what I would call it. We talked about the forces of darkness doing all these terrible things, but perhaps not equally, but there do seem to be forces of light working as well. For example, the internet. I mean, how did that ever come about? I mean, how did we ever get this ability to share limitless amounts of information for no cost? I mean, how did that come about? It's never happened before in the last 2,000 years of history. Books were very expensive, people were illiterate, and how has it come about? It's a miracle. So I tend to think of things like that and try and remind myself of things like that, because I think there is this positive influence as well as all the darkness that seems to be surrounding us. I think there are these positive forces batting for us as well, and that I think is worth considering as well.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned this, because Andrew, this is also the purpose of this broadcasting, is to give our audience, or the people which will listen also to the YouTubes and which we will make afterwards and share with many people. That we give them sort of direction, that fear is there, yes, but you should not be desperate, and you should not fall in the death trap of the DIMS or the threat and fear trap which they have set up for us, but rather also be positive and think about all the good forces, the light forces which are helping us. And, and we are never alone, because we are part of the universe. And that was, my initial thought, that we have to say something to the people listening, that we should not fall in the trap. What do you think?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, this is what I've been trying to tell people. I've received quite a lot of email with all the, the reactors exploded and the plutonium's flying everywhere, and, I'm exaggerating a bit, obviously, but... And it is very, it is very scary. I mean, I'll say quite categorically that on seeing the terrible pictures of the tsunami, I was actually quite ill on Saturday. I had to go to bed because I was so upset by it, to be quite honest with you. And because I've been to Japan twice, so as I think I might have said earlier on, so I've experienced that country. It's for some people it's just a far away place, but I've been there, and so that makes it more real. And I worked with some of the people there, not for long, and it was only there, I think, total for about a week and a half in the 2 visits or something. But it just makes it more real, and they're such wonderful people, really, and they work so hard, and they have such respect for each other. And you go everywhere, and the place is just spotless, everywhere. I was in Tokyo. And I was in awe of the place, the engineering that's there and stuff like that. So that just made it all the more upsetting for me. And I just hope that we can all send out our prayers and positive energies and create a turn for the best for them and for the rest of us,
Yeah, thanks a lot, Andrew. Karen, what are your thoughts?
Well, I want to thank you, Andrew, and actually I just want to share a quick little mantra that is, for me, the best way that I can kind of pray. I sing a song of healing, I sing a song of love. We create what we see. It is time to be free.
Oh yeah, wonderful, Karen. Thanks a lot. That was live, guys. That was no recording or anything. That's Karen live. Absolutely. So we just have a couple of minutes left. So we would like to ask you, Andrew, do you have a website or so where people can get in contact with you?
Yeah, certainly. Check theevidence.com is post most stuff on there. I posted a short article in relation to cold fusion and stuff recently. So yeah, secrecy is one of the problems as well. The secrecy that goes on, that's what this little article I wrote is about.
Yeah, and I think this is not the last time we talk about the subject, and I hope we get you back on the show again, Andrew, and we'll talk with Karen and Rick as well. And we are now reaching our end of the transmission, and we do thank all of our audience listening to Wake News Radio and UNITEDWESTRIKE Radio today. And please be aware, we will have our UNITEDWESTRIKE radio marathon on the 15th to 17th of April. So thanks a lot for listening, and we will go to break now, and thanks a lot for everything.
Detlev, just before we go to break, don't worry about the archives because we'll get them all in one shot anyway, so that's fine. I'm just going to announce this is to all you guys as well, because you don't know, we've got a new show starting. It starts in an hour, and it's I think we're going to call it Zeitgeist Radio, and this is going to be interviewing people from the Venus Project and giving us Venus Projects Venus Project updates as those guys go on. That's the famous movie, Zeitgeist and Zeitgeist moving forward, and all the rest of it.
We went into the break already, but I can we can stop it, and then you can make this announcement right after the song. It's still in time, so that doesn't matter.
Yeah, it just doesn't matter with the archives because we're not doing it on this will come in one big file anyway, so you don't need to worry about it.
So, but you have to wait until the music's over.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
Now I'm stepping in the right shoes. Now can you say you believe that this is going our way now? Please don't be resistant to his love that he has to share with you and me.
So we are live back again because we wanted to mention something which is important. So Wake News Radio and UNITEDWESTRIKE Radio is handing over to Rick. Rick, are you there? Please make your announcement.
Yep, I'm here. We'd like to invite everybody to come and tune in to us in an hour's time where we're going to be doing the start of another broadcast. We don't know if it's going to be weekly, but if you check our schedule, you can find it on www.voteforit.org. Go to UWS Community Radio on the left-hand side there, and you'll find our schedule. We're going to be introducing Zeitgeist Radio, which is going to be the Venus Project. You'll probably see such films as Zeitgeist moving forward, and some of the ideas, these guys have a global network at the moment, and they're talking and they're actively talking. Today is Zeitgeist Day, so this is why we're announcing it, and this is why we're doing it today. And we will hopefully by the end of tonight's show, we'll give you an exact day when this is going to be done, an exact time, so you can sort of tune in every week. They're going to give us news on how they're getting on, and give the option for people to join in, and lots of terrific stuff. So we invite you all to come and join us at the top of the next hour for Zeitgeist Radio.
Okay, thank you. That is basically Greenwich Mean Time. So for people listening from the US or other parts of the world, so please check it out. Okay. So thanks a lot, Rick. And we will see you later, guys. Thanks for listening, and please stay tuned. Within an hour, you will have some more coming. Okay.